My name is Brother Arthro, but I'm told that I no longer need to use that name if I wish. I'm to understand that my childhood has been anything but ordinary. However, in this strange world of colored lights and deafening noise, I no longer know what is normal. I've been advised by a man referring to himself as my attorney that I should write out my experience using my own words, even if they seem unbelievable. So, here is my story. Make of it what you will. I was born into the Children of the Sacred Gate, and we are a self-contained commune. We have existed for 3 generations in our village, living a life of peace and prosperity. I'm told that when I was born, my body was lifted toward the stars by the Beloved himself. Children are considered the greatest gift by our commune. Our community is one of love, but also discipline and structure. One must follow the commands of the sacred tomes. The most important rule is that no one is above Father Gavin. He is the great leader of our people. The title was handed down to him from his father and his father before him. He is a man of great love and wisdom. To even be in his presence causes overwhelming serenity. His ancestors led us from the land of darkness and into the light of the commune. We follow without question, for though he is a kind man, he can be cold and vengeful at the slightest disobedience. I witnessed this firsthand on 2 separate occasions, but I'm getting ahead of myself. To understand what happened to me and why I left, you must understand my community. Our commune runs on a simple but strict hierarchy. The lowest rung are those who tend to the village, farmers, builders, spinners, and the like. Now, don't misunderstand me. These folk are not disrespected in any way. Far from it, they are seen as the backbone of our people. They simply held the least power. The next rung are the clergy and those that work directly for the church. Next are the guardians, who are Gavin's personal servants. They watch over the community and the surrounding forests, protecting us from the darkness that dwells beyond our borders. Then there are the Beloved's wives, known as the brides. Father Gavin always has to have 5 brides, who are to always walk with him. Whenever a bride passes on, which seems to happen every few years, he will immediately take upon another. She must be a pure, unwedded woman of no less than 20 years of age. They all wear simple but regal white dresses with a thick white veil over their faces, for only the Beloved is permitted to look upon them. To be chosen as a bride is considered the greatest honor, for the brides are second only to Gavin himself. There is one other position, one of great importance and honor. Once a generation, one member of the commune would be chosen to be the vagabond. They are the only people ever permitted to venture beyond our borders. They would be given a mission only known between themselves and our leader. They venture forth only to return once they have achieved a great age, and the next vagabond would be sent forth. Only the most loyal and trustworthy of members would even be considered for such a noble position. It was truly a great honor and joy when my very own father was chosen 5 years ago. Though I missed him terribly, I knew that his pilgrimage was one of the utmost importance. Life without my father was a difficult one. I had no blood brothers, and therefore no male figure in my home to look up to. The gate was kind in its mercy, providing a strong male role model and friend in the form of Brother Darian. He was a few years older than me, but always treated me as an equal. He was a boy of strength and kindness. He never feared darkness or even, at times, the hierarchy. Out of sight of the guardians, he would do impersonations of the Beloved that had all the boys bursting with stifled laughter. He was the truest friend I ever had. My years spent in the commune were truly joyous ones. My days were spent in both worship and study. Education was considered crucial to our people. Quote, "The path to darkness is paved with ignorance," end quote. Byron 45:17. We would read the scripture passed down from the first Beloved and have long discussions of their true meaning. After studies, we would aid our community in whatever way the clergy saw fit. Every night of the full moon, we would have a community night service around the fire where we would sing and dance until sunrise. When I turned 12, I was allowed into the second layer made of the older boys. We were to be trained to become strong patriarchs to our families. It was around the bonfire of my first night that the beloved himself told me the origin of our people. I have always had a powerful memory, and I present to you his words verbatim. Quote,
Before man, before life, before time itself, there was the gate. It stood on the edge of the universe in solitude. Over eons unmeasurable, the gate opened, and from its sacred mouth our universe emerged. The gate then gave birth to life itself, and man walked the surface of the earth. For a long time there was nothing but peace. However, even the gate could not keep out the darkness from before creation. The darkness began to consume mankind, turning it into feral creatures of war, greed, and sin. That was how it continued for countless generations until the first came. He was not bred of man, but born from the gate itself, the last true birthing known to our people. He was not corrupted by the ancient darkness. He was pure. With great risk he gathered a flock of rescued children and brought them here. Through his wisdom we have learned the truth, and what was once a mere flock is now a thriving community. Though the rest of humanity lives in darkness, we live in service of the sacred gate, awaiting such a time that it will open again and bless us all. At the time, I was completely enthralled by his incredible words. My faith in Father Gavin was unwavering. That was until the first instance where I saw his wrath. It was a few months ago when all of the second layer were brought together. We were herded by the guardians around one of our own, Brother Darian. He knelt at the foot of the beloved with a look of great sorrow. When all of the boys were gathered, Gavin addressed us. My children, one among you has committed the ultimate taboo. He has left the boundaries of our commune, and he returned with a tome of darkness itself.
He threw something on the ground, and a gasp went through all the other boys. The thrown item was a small book, yet it was nothing like our scriptures. It seemed to have some colorful drawings of a smiling boy. I made out the letters ARC before the beloved doused the book with oil and lit it aflame. We all stood in silence as the book burned, none of us daring to even take a breath. Our father looked at all of our faces sternly.
I see confusion in some of you, but let me be clear. This sin may seem minor to some of you, but I assure you, there is no minor sin.
Gavin motioned Darian to rise, which he did without hesitation. He took the boy's hands, and for the briefest moments I thought he had been forgiven.
A sin can start off small.
With that, he poured a small amount of burning oil over Darian's hand.
But sin spreads and burns the soul itself.
I watched in horror as the oil spread over his hand, sending him into restrained grunts. Finally, the beloved let him go and Darian fell to his knees, cupping his wound. Gavin knelt down at the boy's level and looked him dead in the eyes. His eyes held no love, no gentleness, only fierce anger.
The wound you bear is one you have inflicted upon yourself. The pain does not absolve you of your sins. Do you wish to be absolved?
Darian, who even when he was being burned did not flinch, now turned pure white. Even the dresses of the brides were not as pale as the boy before me. He began to shake and his face bore a look of absolute terror. However, through both fear and tears, he managed to get out the single word. Yes. The beloved smiled and gently took the boy across the field where a simple metal hatch lay. If possible, the boy shook even harder than before. Father Gavin gently stroked his arm.
Do not fear, my child, for if you truly wish to be absolved, then there is only one path. I ask once more, do you wish to be absolved?
A single tear rolled down the boy's face and he nodded. His body no longer shook. Gavin opened the hatch, and I swear the whole world went silent. I tried to get a look inside and glanced at a ladder before one of the older boys held me back, shaking his head at me. No one made a sound, but I swear I could hear something coming from the hatch. It sounded almost like a hum, but I thought I could make out faint whispers behind it. The beloved gestured to the hatch, and with no argument, Darian went down the ladder into the hall. Father Gavin closed and sealed the hatch. That was when the screaming started. Darian, a boy who feared not the dark, was screaming in absolute terror. For 2 days he screamed as if he was being murdered, and on the 3rd day, he fell silent. It would still be another 3 days before he emerged, and when he did, he was no longer the boy I knew. His hair was blindingly white with a complexion to match. He never again spoke unless spoken to by someone higher. He no longer laughed or had interest in games. The only time he truly came alive was during the monthly night service, where his voice rang to the stars in praise of the gate. The brother I knew was gone forever. Looking back, I should have left then, but I was too far in. I no longer knew if it was faith or fear that kept me there, but I stayed nonetheless. That was until tonight, the night my father came home from his pilgrimage. No vagabond had ever returned in less than 30 years. It was not his time, and yet into the village he strode. I ran to meet him, but he walked right past me and straight to the beloved who took him to his home. I didn't realize how much I had missed my father until I saw him. Against the rules and my better judgment, I snuck over to Gavin's home. Thankfully, darkness had fallen, or I would never have gotten past the guardians. My path took me past the strange hatch, and chill rushed through my body. I moved past it quickly and crouched beneath the window of his den. I could hear my father and Gavin talking. However, I could not make out their words. That was until my father belted out,
"Screw your gates."
I found myself completely dumbfounded. I had never heard my father speak that way before, and he had certainly never used the tone with the beloved. The father I knew would never dream of it. He was far too loyal. I risked rising up and peeking through the curtain. Inside was indeed my father and the beloved, as always flanked by his 5 brides. Gavin seemed shocked, but not shaken. He leaned back and tented his fingers.
"Brother Jacob, you speak in the manner of the Dark Ones."
My father grew angry and thrust his finger toward him.
"You are the Dark One. You and this whole God-forsaken place."
I saw the beloved twitch at the word God. He didn't interrupt, however, and let my father continue.
"You've been lying to us from the beginning, you and your fathers. I see the truth now, and I'm not putting up with it anymore. I am taking my family and getting out of here."
The guardians in the room moved to grab my father, but a single raised finger from Gavin stopped them in their tracks. He stared at my father with far too calm eyes.
"Brother Jacob, you have been corrupted by the darkness and have committed the ultimate sin. Were you any other man, you would be dead already. However, I believe loyalty can be relearned. I believe that your sin can be absolved. Do you wish to be absolved?"
My father then said another phrase that I do not understand, but the beloved seemed to understand it just fine. He let out a sigh and folded his fingers as if in prayer.
"Then I am afraid you offer me no choice. For your sins, I sentence you to excommunication."
What happened next is a moment I will never forget as long as I live. All at once the 5 brides reached up and removed their veils. What was under those veils was not human. I remember seeing a couple of the brides before they were wed, and this was not them, at least not anymore. The brides all had strange, grayish-brown skin. There were ridges across their faces, and their eyes were a deep ember. Their once beautiful, white teeth were now rows of razor-sharp fangs. The brides all seemed to hover over my father, and all began to suck in at once. My father screamed in agony as some strange, white vapor was sucked from his mouth. Before my very eyes, I saw my father's skin wrinkle and crack violently. His hair turned white, and then his whole body crumpled to dust on the floor. As my father's body disappeared, the brides looked out the window and their eyes widened in shock. They could see me, and it took me less than a second to know what I had to do. I turned on my feet and ran. I do not possess the physique of a guardian, but in that moment it did not matter. I ran faster than any before me. I did not dare to look over my shoulder, for all that lay behind me was death. All that mattered was what lay ahead, and to bring myself to it with utmost haste. As I reached the trees of the forest, I could hear the footsteps of the guardians behind me. I could not let them catch me, not for anything. Images of those horrid faces filled my mind, fueling my every step. I ran with those thundering footfalls behind me, and suddenly they vanished. I emerged on the other side of the tree line and found myself bewildered. In the distance, I could see strange balls of light as far as my eyes could see. Black pathways with red and white lights traveling in opposite directions filled my vision. That was when the noise started, and I could hear a great rumble coming toward me. I saw yellow lights and feared the brides had found me. The lights and the rumble grew until I thought I would faint. Then they stopped, and that is when a man appeared from behind the lights and asked if I needed any help. The kindness in the man's voice stunned me. Was I not in the land of the Dark Ones? How could one speak so kindly to me? The man offered me a ride to the police station, and I didn't know what else to do, so I agreed. Anywhere away from that forest was a blessing. The man brought me here, where I have been asked dozens of questions, each more confusing than the last. I do not understand this new world, but strangely, I feel more comfortable here than I ever did in the commune. Perhaps this is what my father saw on his journey. Of all the questions I have been asked tonight, there is one I can't seem to answer despite understanding it perfectly. Again and again they have asked me where the commune is, and yet I cannot answer. I have already spoken of my gifted memory, and yet I cannot remember the path that brought me here. The police say that it is simply shock, and that the memory will come back to me, but I fear they are wrong. I do not know what force lies within those trees, but I feel as if it does not want to be found. Even more so, I fear what lies within will emerge one day. It is just as the scripture says, quote, "As surely as the sun will rise each day, the gate will open again. With it will come new life that will spread across the plains and rivers of the earth like fire. To those who dwell in the darkness, you shall all know terror and death." End quote. Orcathis 5:14-4. This is Inspector Arthur Knight, and the truth is, I do not know why I'm writing this. Perhaps it is a long-trained need to document everything. Perhaps it is for some greater reason. All I know is, I know I need to get this written, or I run the risk of forgetting again. If you're reading this, let me first assure you that every word, no matter how fantastical it may seem, is true. If you are reading this, then consider it your warning for the things that are to come. It all began in this very office. I had just gotten in after a restless night of sleep. I had horrible dreams the night before, and I was completely wiped out. My partner, Stacy Jackson, came to the door and told me the chief wanted to see me immediately. I gave her a small nod and made my way to his office. The chief sat behind his desk, and I could tell right away that something was deeply troubling the man. He looked as run down as I felt, and his skin had paled. "Is everything all right, sir?" I asked nervously. He simply gestured to the chair in front of him and told me to take a seat. We sat in silence for a moment as he seemed to search for the right words. "What do you remember of your childhood?" he finally asked. I simply shrugged. "I grew up in an orphanage until I turned 18. I was always top of my class and loved." The chief held up his hand and interrupted me. "I mean, before the orphanage," he said gently. I tried to think back further, but my mind simply stopped as if it had hit a brick wall. I remember very little, to be honest. I have flashes of a highway, a truck driver, the police station, and you, of course, I said. This finally brought a smile from the man. "I was nothing but a desk jockey back then. You were nothing much more than a scared child with no clue where he was and what was going on." I chuckled at him. "That's kind of what I feel now, to be honest," I explained. The smile left his face and he was back to business. "Earlier this morning, a young woman was found on the side of the same exact stretch of road where you were found 25 years ago. She was covered in blood and screaming. One of our officers found her and got her into the car. We have an audio recording of what followed. I am warning you, it is something disturbing." He pulled out a digital recorder and pressed play. The sound of the young woman screaming and panting filled the air and it chilled my blood.
Who are you, And where are you taking me? We need to get away. He is coming. He is coming and we have to try and stop him. He killed everyone. Arthro. Where is Arthro?
The woman screamed and then a choking sound rang out. The chief shut off the recorder. The young woman seemed to choke on her own tongue after that. The officer can make no sense of it, but hopefully the people at the morgue will have better luck. I barely heard his words. My mind focused on a single word. Arthro, I said in confusion and bewilderment. The chief nodded. That was the name you gave us when we brought you in. The woman was wearing an identical white robe to the one you wore that night. When you gave your statement, you spoke about some sort of commune. At the word commune, my mind again slammed into that brick wall. But was there a little give this time? I had the briefest glimpse of a set of small buildings in a field. The chief continued on. You said many things in your statement, and to be honest, I didn't truly believe most of it. However, I did believe you were in a commune, and I feel this morning confirms it. We had several men search the area where she was found, and they all came up empty-handed. This is why I want you to take a look. Your detective skills and personal history make you the perfect candidate for this case. However, if you do not want to, I understand and will respect that wish. I thought about it for what felt like several minutes. I felt a great sense of fear about returning to this place, but I also felt a sense that I simply had to go. I gave him a quick nod and told him I would take care of it. I left the office and saw Stacy outside. We're going for a drive, I said, and she followed immediately. I let Stacy take the wheel. I wanted to fill her in on everything I could remember. She sat in silence as I explained. When I finished, she took a deep breath.
Wow, I knew you grew up in an orphanage, but a commune? Was it a nice place?
She asked intently. Another mental flash assaulted my brain. I could see a swish of white fabric. I could smell oil, and I could hear the sizzling of something burning. I don't think so, I said finally.
So, wait, did you name yourself Arthur Knight?
She asked with a smile. I found myself grinning as well. Stacy always knew how to calm me down. I grew up fascinated with the stories of Arthur and his Knights of the Round Table. I'd almost completely forgotten the name Arthro until the chief brought it up. We finally made our way to the roadside where the other officers stood having coffee. We got out and the men gave us a little salute. One of the officers shook his head at me. I'm sorry they had to waste your time, Mr. Knight. We have scanned these woods for miles and there is nothing, not even a set of footprints. I simply shrugged. Well, you never know what a fresh set of eyes can bring. Thank you for your hard work, gentlemen. Please keep the perimeter, and we will see what we can find. I said, and they gave me back a nod. Stacy and I entered the woods. Everything seemed at peace, and the officers were right. There was not so much as a footprint or leaf out of place. Stacy turned to me.
Do you really think we will find anything out here? I mean, these aren't exactly the deepest or most untrodden woods. If there was a cult out here, you would think they would have found it long ago.
She asked. I nodded back. I agree with you, but we are on an assignment and we will do our due diligence regardless. We continued hiking through the woods and a strange feeling of unease ran over me. It would seem that the feeling wasn't a lone one, for Stacy spoke up.
This place feels weird. It's not bad, per se, but it just feels off somehow. Do you know what I mean?
I knew what she meant, and after a few moments I understood why. This place was completely silent. There were no animal or insect noises at all. Even the sound of the nearby officers had completely disappeared. You never truly know how much noise we deal with on a daily basis until you enter a place of true silence. I was prepared to say that we should search another area, but that was when we spotted a body. When we saw her, laying on the ground was a white robed body of a woman with deep bloody gashes in her back. I ran to her and turned over her body. One look at her face knocked me straight off my feet as hundreds of repressed memories flooded my brain. I knew her face. I could see it staring over me as I awoke, walking with me through the gardens and sitting with me reading scripture. Stacy stared at me with concern.
Did you know her?
She asked timidly. I nodded. Her name was Mira, and she was my mother. Stacy's eyes widened and she did a double take at the body. No doubt she was trying to see the similarities.
If she was killed out here, then would that young girl they found be your sister?
She asked in a panic. I shrugged. I don't remember having a sister, but that was over 20 years ago. Things could have changed. I replied.
What about your father?
She asked. The word father brought a horrible image of a body wasting away to my mind. He is gone, I said flatly, and Stacy knew to drop the subject.
It looks like a bear might have gotten to her with those slashes up her back,
Stacy explained. I examined the wounds and shook my head. The slices are too straight. This was done by a blade, likely a sword. Stacy shook her head.
Who would be using a sword in the modern age?
She asked. Guardians, my mind said, and the word faded. I don't know, I replied instead.
Also, how did those officers miss this? We are a straight line away from the road and not even far in,
she asked. It wants to be found this time, I said, not even understanding the words.
We need to call this in,
Stacy responded, reaching for her radio. I put my hand on her arm and stopped her. We don't know who or what is out here. I don't want the crime scene team walking into a hostile area. We need to follow her tracks and see where she came from, I explained. Stacy paused for a moment but nodded. I don't think she suspected my true motives, but she would soon. We made our way through the woods. Neither of us said anything, nor did our hands stray far from our service pistols. Normally, this is when people might feel like they were being watched, but weirdly, it was the opposite. We felt completely and utterly alone. Somehow, that felt worse to me. We passed through a set of trees and found ourselves in what should have been a clearing. However, instead, it was a rustic village. Wooden buildings looking like they were from another time stood in a row. Stacy marveled at the discovery. She turned to me, and her face, when as pale as mine, probably was. It was as if something had smashed the brick wall in my mind and memories flooded in like a river. Every building was a piece of my tortured childhood brought back. The dorms where the children were kept, the fields where we tilled the land for our food, the fire pit where we held night services and festivals. I fell to my knees and screamed at the onslaught of my mind. Stacy knelt and tried to comfort me. Slowly, I regained myself and stood up.
This place is creeping me out, Arthur. It is giving me serious Jamestown vibes,
she said in a panic. Or something much worse, I replied. I could feel it in the air. Something was very different about this place. Something was horribly wrong here. It took a moment for it to truly fall into place. This place is completely empty. It is never empty out here during the day. People should be working, but there's no one. And the only time this place would be empty would be if... I didn't waste time in completing the thought, and instead I rushed towards the church. If our leader, the beloved, called an emergency meeting, then everyone would be forced to attend. They had to be in the church. I ran with Stacy right on my heels. I got to the doors and yanked them open wide. What I saw stopped my heart. My assumptions were correct, and everyone in town was gathered in the pews. However, where there should have been murmuring or prayer, there was simply silence. The crowd did not speak or even move. I slowly walked forward and my blood ran cold. Everyone in the pews, every member of the commune was dead. They sat completely motionless with their faces cold and gray. Everyone's left eye was missing with bloody trails leading down their face. Yet what shocked me the most was the eerie calm on their faces. In their final moments, they were completely serene. I could not stand the look at their frozen faces anymore, and I turned to the front of the church, but all that waited there was more carnage. Lying on the stage were the village's guardians. They were in every way the opposite of the rest of the commune. They were the only ones who had both of their eyes, and the only ones who did not die in peace. Their faces bore turmoil and pain in every inch. Their bodies had contorted and seemed to be sprouting strange appendages. Some had grown claws and muzzles, others had long spikes coming from their backs. One thing was certain, they had not died as men, but monsters. Stacy ran from the church at full speed. I rushed out to join her. She was bent over, and I thought she might have been losing her lunch. She was a tough one, though, and kept her cool.
I'm sorry. I've never seen something that horrible. Have you?
She asked, panting. I stood and thought to myself for a moment. My mind flashed to the night I left, when the 5 brides of our master sucked my father's life force from him, leaving nothing but bone and dust. Only once, was my only reply. I gave her a moment to catch her breath before we continued. There was still a mystery to be solved here, and I couldn't help but notice something missing back in the church. Our leader, Father Gavin, was not among the dead, nor were his 5 brides. We need to search the commune starting with his quarters. Now you listen, and listen well. If you see Gavin, bring him in alive, but if you see his brides, you shoot to kill. Do not hesitate for a moment. Do you understand? I asked her firmly. She gave an immediate nod, and that was all I needed. We made our way to Gavin's cabin with our service pistols drawn. We were taking no chances. As we walked, more memories flooded my mind, but I could not let them distract me. We encountered his cabin slowly. It proved to be as silent as the rest of the commune and just as empty. We entered his study, something the me from childhood wouldn't dare to do. We found the room deserted and began to search for clues. There's a single desk with a blackboard behind it. There was a world map in the center and with several arrows pointed to various countries. One pointed to Romania near the Carpathian Mountains. There were a couple in North America, and one that was just circling the earth with a note saying, "Doesn't move." On the blackboard were a list of words including chaos, blood, time, death, and life. The last word was underlined several times. The more that I stared at the board, the less it made sense. I glanced up, and on the roof a single word had been carved into the wood. Orcathis. My memories had not fully returned, but I knew that word above me was familiar. Looking upon it gave me a sense of dread I had never known before. Stacy had been rifling through Gavin's journal on the desk. Her eyes widened and she looked at me in both fear and confusion.
Listen to the last entry dated yesterday,
she yelled. I turned my attention from the carving and gave it completely to her. She began reading from the journal.
The vagabond has returned, and for the first time in generations, they were successful in their mission. The research they have provided me has proven my theory. They have found evidence of the others. The darkness of men shall soon be washed away from this earth. The era of the gates shall now begin.
Gates? I shouted in confusion. We were the children of the sacred gate, but the beloved never spoke of others. But was that true? Had I not heard these words from my own father in this very house? Stacy ignored my outbursts and kept reading.
Tomorrow the children must all be gathered for the final service. Tomorrow we begin the opening. Tomorrow is the day of absolution.
The word absolution struck my brain like a brick, bringing me back one of my darkest memories. I know where they are, I said simply. Stacy understood my tone and didn't question my resolve. We made our way out of the house and through the field. I knew the way to our destination as if I had walked there yesterday. In moments we stood before the hatch. Decades ago, my best friend Darian was sent down into the hatch alone. What came out was something else entirely. He had emerged 6 days later with no personality, no spark for anything other than worship. They had stolen his childhood in the name of absolution. I stared at the hatch with both fire and fear coursing through my veins. It was time to face my past. It was time to face him. I threw open the hatch and my ears were assaulted with the familiar hum. Before it was gentle, barely even noticeable, but now it was almost deafening. I looked at Stacy and it would seem she didn't notice it. "Can you not hear that?" I yelled. She was taken aback for a moment at my non-characteristic shouting.
Hear what?
She asked back. A piece of scripture from my childhood echoed in my mind. Only those who choose to listen can be made to hear. I shook my head and said never mind. I stared down into the hole and could only see a ladder and seemingly endless darkness. "I need to go in alone," I said firmly. This time Stacy objected.
You can't be serious. We have no idea who or even what is down there. I've gone with you this whole time, but there is something wrong with all of this. I feel like we have left the real world behind, and I don't know how to deal with all of this. I'm scared, Arthur. I didn't know I could feel this level of fear."
For the first time, it was my turn to bring her comfort. I went to her and pulled her into a deep hug. It may not have been the most professional of moves, but it was the only thing I could think of to calm her. "I'm terrified as well, but I know that I have to do this. For all those people back there and all those that came before us, I have to end this." Stacy nodded at me.
"Tell me what you need,"
she said strongly. "I'm going to climb down and I want you to seal the hatch. If I knock 3 times, open it. If you don't hear from me in 2 hours, then get out. Call for backup and report the incident. If I don't return, then don't let anyone else go down there and keep it sealed forever. Do you understand?" I asked. A single tear went down her face, but she nodded her assurance. Without another word, I went down the ladder and listened while Stacy twisted the lock shut. For better or worse, I was in this until the end. I took the ladder to the bottom to find myself in a long tunnel. There was something wrong about the whole thing. Being underground with no exterior lights could have rendered me completely blind down here. However, I could see everything perfectly clearly. Another piece of scripture flooded my mind. Quote, "Those who walk in the light of the gate shall never be blinded by the dark." End quote. The hum had changed as well. On the surface it was deafening, but down here it simmered and yet felt stronger. I could feel it rush through my body and it became like a second heartbeat. I knew right away that whatever this tunnel was, it did not obey natural laws and I needed to be prepared for everything. With no choice but to go forward, I began my march through the tunnel. The tunnel seemed impossibly long and I could feel time slipping away as I walked through it. I didn't dare run because running in the dark was often a death sentence. Ahead, I could hear the sound of many tiny feet walking. I drew my pistol, though some part of me felt as if it would do no good. The sound grew louder and high-pitched chattering joined it. Out of the darkness came a horde of scurrying rats. They moved like a wave of fire through the tunnel. There was something off about them, though. Their faces were far too thin and contorted. 2 long fangs dripped from each of their mouths. The size of the fangs was completely wrong for their heads. It was an outright impossibility. They possessed scorpion-like tails that were wrapped around their necks like nooses. They also crawled along the ceiling like spiders or lizards. I had no choice but to close my eyes to the abomination, and when I opened them, there was no trace of them remaining. As I traveled, the air grew warmer and more humid. The ground grew slick, and the very sight of the tunnel changed. Before I would say it was illuminated by a dark blue light, but now it was turning a shade of deep crimson. The hum began to change as well. It took on a loud drumming sound, seeming more like a heartbeat than ever. Every step increased in volume, and I knew whatever I came here to face, it was getting closer. A deep blackness met me at the end of the tunnel, and I could hear a deep breathing sound. From the darkness came a single word from a deep, non-human voice.
"Arthur."
I stood on the edge of the darkness and took a steadying breath. This was my moment. I stepped into the endless blackness. On the other side, my vision cleared and I could see everything once again. I had reached the end of the tunnel. Standing at the very end was a wall of pure obsidian. However, wall was the wrong word, perhaps. It was more of a portal, a gate. In its black depths, a dark lightning blasted and pulsed. I could hear whispering coming from the other side in a language I did not recognize. I felt drawn to that whispering as if it was calling me. I took a step towards it before a voice stopped me in my tracks.
"Welcome home, Arthur."
The voice took me back to my childhood and my nightmares. I looked down and there he was, my master, Father Gavin. He sat cross-legged in the center of a 5-pronged star. At each end of the star was one of the brides. They were all dead, sprawled on the floor with large gaping holes where their wombs were. He looked up at me with a sinister smile. Both of his eyes were gone, but he seemed to be in no pain.
"I always knew you would come back, my boy. You are the Kata, the returned one,"
he said casually. I stared at him with hatred. "Is that why you had my mother killed?" He merely laughed at me.
Your mother and her calf were cowards who could not handle the absolution at hand. They were dealt with as such.
The word again sent a chill through me. What is the day of absolution? I asked. He laughed again and his voice got deeper as it went.
I thought that was obvious. The gate is opening, the first gate, the gate of life. He has finally begun to awaken. He with the 5 eyes, Orcathis. When all the eyes open, all others will close forever. He sees all, and you shall see him.
My eyes drew to the gate, and it began to move. The blackness gave way to blinding white light. My whole body shook as I beheld what was before me. I stood in front of a pure white eyeball. In that moment, the tunnel faded away and everything with it. I stood in the depths of pure blackness. It was like outer space, but no stars shone. The only illumination was from the creature standing before me. To describe him is impossible. He was a creature beyond understanding. He bore no traditional limbs save 5 eyeballs, each a different color and each as large as a galaxy. Standing before each eye was a creature submerged in shadows. I could not make out their forms, only vague impressions of ash, bone, blood, and fangs, in a sensation that I could only describe as knowledge. I knew that these were guardians, the true guardians. I turned my attention back to the white eye, and in that moment, I saw his plans, his prophecy. The children of the gate rise from their seeming death. They marched from the commune, the first army of the beast. They would find the other gates and bring fresh sacrifices to open them. There was nothing but darkness and screaming. I could stand to watch no longer for the risk of becoming mad. I forced myself to turn, and when I did, I ran. I could hear the maniacal laughter of Father Gavin behind me, but I did not care. I ran through the tunnel at full speed. I ran into no illusions or tricks this time. All I could think about was the hatch. I told Stacy to leave after 2 hours and never open it again. I don't know how long I had been down here, but I had to be coming close to that mark. After countless minutes of pure running, I at last saw the ladder. I rushed up and, praying to any god that would listen, that Stacy was still there. I reached the top and pounded 3 times. Several minutes went by and no answer. I began to weep, but that was when the hatch opened and daylight flooded in. I leapt from the hole and told her to close the lid. I lay there, simply kissing the very dirt beneath me. Stacy gave me a strange look.
Wow, Arthur, I never knew you to be one to be afraid of the dark before.
I returned a look of confusion. What are you talking about? I asked.
I mean, I barely had enough time to seal the lid before you pounded at the door.
She explained. I could not believe what I was hearing. I had been down there for hours and yet seemingly no time had passed. My thoughts went to Brother Darian. He had spent 6 days of surface time in that hole. How long had it been for him? Stacy looked me in the eyes and I could feel her concern.
We need to report this right away,
she said. I shook my head. I need you to listen to me, and above all else, I need you to trust me. We have a task that needs doing. It didn't take long to tell her everything that took place in the tunnel. To my surprise, it took even less time for her to believe me. We nodded and set about our work. With a dense forest surrounding us, it didn't take us long to find the necessary kindling. We placed them all around the church, and with a toss of Stacy's lighter, it was ablaze in minutes. We stood and watched as buildings and bodies burned. Neither of us spoke, for nothing needed to be said. It should have felt like a victory, but I knew that all we were doing was buying time. But the truth was nothing was going to stop the wheels in motion. He is coming. Orcathis is coming. Interesting. I wonder if there will be a part 3. The author said that I'm free to narrate his stories or their stories. So if there is a part 3, I'll try to I'll try to check in and see if there is one. There was 2 parts in this story. The first part was the first part and the second part was the second part. So yeah, you're welcome for the absolutely beautifully, immaculately incredible description there. Anyways, thank you all so much for listening. I hope you all enjoyed the story. Let me know what you thought about it down below. I thought it was pretty cool. pretty interesting cult stuff. I remember listening to cult stuff on Vid's channel from stuff he did back in the day. Some of them were incredibly gruesome, though. So if you do go seek those out, discretion advised. But yeah, thank you all so much for listening. I will see you in the next Ego Volt Anima Vestra.